Hello, and welcome to the Mommy Escape Time podcast. I'm Lauren. I'm a wife and a new mom. I came up with the idea of this podcast after struggling to find mommy groups around me when my son was born. I wanted a community of mothers I heard so many of my friends talk about when they had their children. This podcast is to help mothers like me that want a community of mothers to connect with when they have their free time. Together with my usual guest, Taryn, and other mothers, we will share our experiences, not our advice, through motherhood, and hopefully get some tips from you, the listeners. So come join us on the Mommy Escape Time podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Mommy Escape Time podcast. I'm Lauren, and I am your host today. And today I've actually interviewed my friend, Stacy. And she's not just my friend, she is my sister-in-law. She's Brian's sister, in case people care which side she comes from. But Stacy, I've known Stacy almost as long as I've known my husband, Brian. I think we met at least probably like the first weeks that we were dating. And it was very interesting because Stacy was pregnant at the time with her daughter. And I've kind of gotten to see everything that she's going to talk about in this episode. And this episode focuses on mothers that change their careers after having kids or after having a child. This subject interests me a lot. I have interviewed other people on the podcast before. Pyle has done this. Kristen has also done this. If you want to go back and listen to their stories also. Kristen's was a little more unexpected than everyone else's, but I think it's important that people see that it's okay to change careers, and that Stacy will talk about it a little bit in the interview about how you need to be doing something you're passionate about. And I think it's important for your kids to see that you are working on things that you are passionate about. So I'm going to play the interview of Stacy and I talking about her career change. I hope you enjoy. Hi, Stacy. Welcome. Why don't you tell the audience about your family?
Sure. So our family, it's just me, my husband, Greg, who works full-time in the city and travels a lot, and my daughter, I'll just call her B, and she just turned 6 years old.
And for anyone who doesn't understand, the city in our neck of the woods always means New York City.
Right.
We have a lot of international listeners, so sometimes they don't understand when we say the city. That's what we mean.
Is New York City not the only city in the world?
Exactly. So you're here today because you have, I don't want to say a unique situation, but you obviously worked before you had a child, and then you went back to work after you had a child, but then you kind of changed careers after having a child. So we're going to kind of talk about that process today. I try and bring on a few people every so often to talk about that because I think it's kind of interesting, and maybe it's a mindset change when you become a mom, or just a new type of focus and how your life changes afterwards. So we'll start at the very beginning. You were born. So what was your, what type of job did you have when you were pregnant with me?
So I had worked ever since, college graduation. So moved to the city and had always been working in advertising and media. So basically what that means is I would develop strategy around how to invest clients' money in advertising. So how to best, who their target audience is, how to reach them most effectively and efficiently. And I had been doing that for 15 plus years. And it was and is, an intense job, very demanding, lots of long hours and stressful, but also, fun at the same time. And when I was pregnant, I was working on Estee Lauder companies, which, I loved. I loved the brands, all beauty, but, intense and demanding.
Right. And while you were pregnant, did you find it harder to do the job? Was it?
No, I mean, I had a fairly, easy pregnancy, I guess, quotes. I didn't get sick. I didn't, lose energy or anything like that. So no, I didn't have any issues when I was pregnant. So
And
that was.
unlike me, you worked right up until the day you had your
I did
child.
actually. I make sure Brooke knows this that I actually my she was one day past her due date, and I was going into the city. I take the train, so I live about it's a 25-minute train ride outside of the city. Um, and I walked to the train, got on the train. Nobody offered me a seat, first of all. So I'm 9 months plus a day pregnant, and it's June. No one offered me a seat, so I remember that. And then I had a client meeting up on 59th Street. So I get out of Grand Central. I walk up to the client meeting because it's a beautiful day and have the meeting. And I get up to go to the bathroom. At one point, I come back, and my client's like, "Stacy, are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she's like, "Okay." And then like a few minutes later, she's like, "Stacy, you just made a face." I'm like, "Yeah, I have this like weird cramp." She's like, I don't think that's a cramp. I think like that's a contraction, and you're probably in labor." I'm like, "No, no, no, I'm fine." She's like, "Okay, can we just stop the meeting?" I'm like, "No, we will finish the meeting." So we finished the meeting, and then she's like, "Let's go to the hospital." I'm like, "Wait, no." And she's like, "Call your husband, have him meet you at the hospital." I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "Yes." So I like we get out of the building. I start walking towards the subway. She's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I was gonna get the subway." She's like, "I've got you an Uber. Let's go." So my client and like a couple of the girls I work with hopped in the cab. I'm like, "Oh, we're all going," and go to the hospital. And Brooke was born. My daughter was born shortly thereafter. So yeah,
Yeah. I know. I always think that. I remember when I was pregnant, I was like, oh, well, Stacy worked right up until she was at a meeting and she just, walked over to the hospital and it
yeah,
was no big deal. And that was
nope.
so my goal.
Well, um, that actually, I think will probably segue into kind of maternity leave, whatever. But in my mind, I'm like, let me work as much as I can. Like, I don't want to have to take some, a week or 2 weeks beforehand because I want all my maternity leave when I have my baby. So, I mean,
Right.
let me work as far up to it so I can kind of save all that for when she's here. So that was part of the reason, and part of it was just like, why not? What am I going to do? Sit at home? And then my hospital was in the city, so I'm like, I might as well just be in the city. So
Right.
yeah,
That works out. So how did you while you were pregnant, you decided how long you were going to take for?
yeah. This is when I knew we were going to talk about this. I'm like, wait, I don't even remember how this all happened, and it actually brought up a memory that wasn't so great. I had been at this company for over like 6 or 7 years, and it's one of the biggest global media agencies in the world. Have decent health insurance. I thought for sure, like I'd never investigate. Like you hear in the U.S., everybody gets 3 months maternity leave, so I assumed it was 3 months paid maternity. And I shouldn't say everyone.
Right.
That's kind of the standard, and for full time, working people. Um, I know many people don't get that at all, but I was just assuming I would get 3 months paid maternity. Um, and I had worked with, and I had a lot of people who worked for me who had babies, and everyone just the standard 3 months. So that was what I was planning on. And then I like filled out forms with human resources, and I had to go talk to them, and they informed me that I got 6 weeks paid. I'm like, excuse me? I've been here like 10 years, and I was a pretty senior role. I'm like, I only get 6 weeks paid. Are you kidding me? And they're like, well, the policy changed at some point. So I told them I was pregnant in like January or February of 2013, the year my daughter was born. And apparently there was a policy change in December. Well, it came in I guess January 1st of 2013. Like, had you told us that you were pregnant earlier in December, then you would have gotten 12 weeks. I'm like, wait, that makes zero. So I was just very, very angry, and I felt it was kind of bitter. I'm like this. So I only got 6 weeks paid, but I was entitled to take off 3 months, so I took my full 12. Obviously, I didn't get paid for it, but whatever. And then it was time. As soon as I had my daughter, I started like counting down. I'm like, oh no, that's a 1 week gone. Like it was always this mental in my head. I'm like, no, no, no. I got to about 2.5 months out, and my boss called. He's like, hey, let's meet for lunch. So I brought my daughter. We had lunch in the city, and he's like, how's everything going? I'm like, great. I'm like, you know what? I can't come back. I'm like, I'm not ready. And he's like, whatever you need, you know. So in that respect, I felt very supported. Obviously, again, it wasn't paid. But I'm like, I think I need at least another month. And he's like, that's fine, whatever you need. So I ended up taking a little over 4.5 months, I guess. And I went back. By that time, the timing, I think it was end of October, early November. So in my head, I'm like, okay, I'll go back, and I just need to make it through a couple weeks. Like people are gonna be easy on me the first couple weeks, then it's Thanksgiving, and then I go back, then it's Christmas. So
Right.
I that was kind of my mindset. So
Yeah, I think that's yeah, it's definitely for people who have to go back after 6 weeks, like I don't even know how you can uh,
I mean, 6 weeks, one, you're just physically feeling better. You're
right.
feeling like yourself, and then it's like. Wait, I don't even like. I'm just starting to get the baby's just starting to get personality and
Right.
smiling and laughing. It's like
Right,
no,
and you finally like start to get the hang of it. Like it's like, "Oh,
exactly,
okay. Now I
exactly.
like can do
Yeah, I don't
something."
know
Yeah.
how people do that.
Yeah. Definitely. So then you went back to work and you worked full time when you came back, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And and then what kind of changed to make you think maybe I should change jobs or
So,
careers?
we had hired a nanny, so we had a full-time nanny who was wonderful, and she loved my daughter. My daughter loved her. That was all working out great, and I didn't feel any stress of balancing both. How do I balance work? Because I felt like I could totally focus on work when I was at work and totally focus on my daughter when I was home for the most part. Um, so that was all fine, and that was so it wasn't like, oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I need to make a change. But I had had this career in um, media forever. I had also always had this kind of side passion around fashion and styling. And even before I became pregnant, I had been taking night classes at FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology, um, and other certificate classes around styling and fashion, just as something kind of interesting for me to do. And I didn't necessarily have a plan of making that a career, but I was like, I like this and I'm interested. And the more I was exposed to it, the more I realized there are career opportunities um, out here potentially. So it had always kind of been in the back of my mind. And then when I was on maternity leave, no, it wasn't. It was like that December after I went back to work, and we had in my company we always had that week between Christmas and New Year's off. So I remember I was home and just kind of looking through like LinkedIn and like what's out there, and I saw an application for this startup that was like a personal styling startup, and it was like remote and freelance. I was like, oh, this is super interesting. So I applied, and they ended up hiring me, and it was totally freelance. So it's just like whatever you want to put into it, you'll get out of it. No, obligations. I'm like, okay, this is great. So I did that, just a little bit on the weekends and a little bit here and there, and I really liked it, but it was by no means like a job. It was just like a little extra something that was fun. And I continued, focusing on my media career, but I had stopped being like, you always look a couple levels up, and it's
Right.
like, okay, that's what I'm doing next, that's what I'm doing next. And if someone had asked me, 5 years ago, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And then, I'm going to be running a region, I'm going to be running the New York office, I'm going to be doing this. And if you asked me that at that point, I'm like, I don't want that anymore. I don't want to run a New York office. Like it wasn't as appealing to me as it had been. And I kind of feel like whenever you stop wanting the next, it's time to move on. Like
Right.
I didn't want to just be complacent. Like that wasn't an exciting feeling for me. So I'm like, okay, it's time for me to explore something else. And kind of around the time I made that realization, the company I was freelancing for um, was changing. They got a big investment from another holding company, and during that process, they kind of reevaluated their whole structure, and they no longer wanted people to freelance, and they wanted to kind of bring everything in-house and have full-time stylists, fewer full-time stylists who could work out of a New York City office. So they reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested, and of course, I was immediately interested, like so excited. I'm like, yes, this is what I would love to do. Tell me about the compensation. And at that point, I almost like choked. I'm like, excuse me, what? Because it was like ridiculously low, I should say. Sometimes when I tell people that story, it's like, oh, that's great. I'm like, oh, no, no, I mean ridiculous as in like the other way. Um, so I said, I didn't even tell my husband about it. And I'm like, you know what? Thank you for reaching out, but no, I can't do that. But then I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm just like, you know what? This sounds really great. I'm like, you know what? I don't need cable. I don't need this. I don't need like. So I was like rationalizing all these things in my head that I could make it work. And I mentioned it to Greg, and I think he like spit out his coffee when I told him the salary. But then eventually I'm like, you know what? I have to do this. And Greg's like, if you want to do it, do it. And I'm like, I have to because if I didn't, I knew I would always regret it. And also, on the flip side, I'm like, if I do this, I go do it for 2 months, I can go back to my old job. It's not going anywhere. Like,
Right.
so I didn't feel like the risk was really there. So I resigned, and everybody was shocked. They're like, "This is awesome for you. It sounds perfect." And I said, "I'm like, I can come back, right? Like, don't fill my position yet." Like, yeah, okay, okay. So so that's what happened. It was just kind of things working out at the right time. And again, I'm fortunate enough to have been able to take a significant cut in salary and not drastically impact my life in my life choices, I guess. And Greg was very supportive, so that um, obviously makes a big difference. And so it was a dream job for about a year and a half until it folded, and then I was kind of without a job. And at that point, so it was like I mentioned, it was an e-commerce startup, and unfortunately, it was about to be acquired by another company, and then the acquisition fell through, and we had no capital. Happens all the time in startups, so it shouldn't have been that shocking. But it was sad because it was my dream job, and I really loved it. And what I loved about it was that I was doing something that I really enjoyed doing, but I had so much more flexibility and control over my life. I could work from home, 3 days a week at that point, and I could kind of work when I wanted, which was great. And I was just able to spend so much more time with my daughter. I still had the nanny at that point, and I think she was making more money than I was. I think I was paying her more than I was making, but I still felt like I needed to like give this my all
Right.
and my focus and have my nanny here. So then when the company folded, at that point it had been a year and a half. And yes, I probably could have gone back to my old company, but I just didn't want to. I'm like, I can't do it. Like whenever I thought about it, I just had like this sinking feeling in my chest. I'm like, I can't do it. So
And you were already
um
used to no money, so I mean.
exactly. I was used to no money. I'm like, what would I even do with my old salary? I'd be like rich. So yeah, and Greg's like, well, figure it out. Let's, take your time. And I was on LinkedIn looking around, and I did go on a bunch of interviews in my old industry, and I'm just like, no, like it was just like literally felt like a ton of bricks on my chest. I'm like, I can't do it. Um, and then a couple of the women that I had met in my old company, who we worked really well together, are like, well, let's do something. What can we do? So we brainstormed, and we ended up starting our own business that was focused on styling, but from more of a corporate training perspective. So that was a learning experience, starting going from a totally corporate career to a startup was one thing, and then going from a startup to like running your own business, own very small business, I should say. I don't want to sound like it's this huge business, but just like do we do an LLP? Do we do a like what? How do we fill out this form? What do we have to do to send into the IRS? Like all of this like stuff, and then actually getting clients. And the easy part was doing the work. Once we got
Right.
clients, like we knew what to do and we knew how to do it well, but it was just all of that other like back business and building the business that was and is a challenge. Um,
So what's the name of your
so
company?
for Seven Consulting. So we work with individual clients where we style them, and we work remotely and we work in person. But the bulk of our business or our focus is really working with companies. We go we work with like their HR, their training and development, and we set up seminars. So we'll talk to people about, how to dress in a way that best like represents yourself and elevates yourself to give you more confidence, and better success in the workplace. And we feel passionate about it, and I think it's something that's really important, um, and it's fun to do.
Right. Especially
So
because
that's
because the way people dress now, I don't think people always know what the correct dress is for the right situation in a workplace.
it's so we have a bunch of different topics, and that is one thing that we address. Like, so many companies were kind of business formal, and then they're switching to business casual. And what does business casual even mean? And business casual in a Seattle tech company is different from business casual in a New York City ad agency, for example. So it's it's different, and it's really, and it's especially in this kind of climate, it's challenging for the company itself to address this, especially with women. You don't want to be someone saying you're dressed inappropriately, because that brings all other kinds of baggage. So it's not really about what's appropriate and what a dress code is, but it's about our point of view, and the kind of the way we look at it is we're not, and your company is not telling you how you can and can't dress, but we're showing you a way that you can help define your personal style and dress in a way that you feel so much more comfortable and confident, that you're more likely to, speak up in a meeting. You feel more confident when you're presenting to your clients. That's only going to benefit you. So that's kind of the approach we take versus, okay, you can wear this, you can't wear this. So
Right.
it's you'll feel better about yourself. And then we also do seminars on, for example, working moms who are just going back to the workplace, who have to get dressed in the morning while they're getting their toddler breakfast and getting their 5-year-old out to kindergarten. Like, we can help you, organize and streamline your closet and make getting dressed easy, fast, and fun. So that's one less thing you have to worry about, and you get out the door and you're still dressed professionally and you feel confident and look good. Like, that's a whole other area of opportunity. So there's different ways that we talk to people about this.
Yeah, that's very good. Um, so I know you talked about this a little bit, but with your own company, then did you still have more time with your daughter, and more time in
Yes.
general as a
So
family?
so let's see. My daughter was about just over 2 when I went to the startup, and then I had kept my nanny for a full year. So she was also going to preschool, and I had the nanny. But then when she turned 3, I decided that that I didn't need. So at that point, I had realized how flexible the job was, and it was a little confusing to my daughter to have me. I have a home office, but it's on the main floor, and my daughter and her nanny, they would be here. I mean, they'd be out and about a lot too, but they'd be here, and she didn't understand like why I was here and not taking care of her, like why I was
Right.
working, but she still had and it was confusing for me too, because like I did want to be the one like that was getting her dressed in the morning, but then I was working. So at that point, I decided, she had turned 3 and she had done a twos program in preschool. I decided to look for a full day preschool for her for 3s, and to eliminate my nanny, which you could have a whole other session on that. That was like saying goodbye to a family member, and it's Brooke adjusted beautiful. My daughter adjusted beautifully, even though she loved her. But it was very traumatizing, kind of for me and for the nanny. But I think it was a great decision. So I ended up sending her to camp. I made this decision in June. Well, I made the decision way before that. It just took me months to get up the courage to tell her. But her last day, I think, was like mid-June, my nanny's last day. And then I had enrolled my daughter in a summer camp that year, where again, she had just turned 3, and she went to a camp, a full day camp, which was fantastic. And so that gave me all day to focus and work, and she wasn't wondering why I wasn't paying attention to her, because she was away at camp. That worked out beautifully. And then she started full day preschool in that September. And we have a great preschool here that I could walk her to, and it's right by the train station, so I could walk her to school and catch a train into the city if it was days I had to work in the city, or if I was working from home, walk her, and she was there from 8 to 6 every day, and they fed her breakfast, lunch, and snacks. So it was great. And so she went there for threes and fours, and then she started kindergarten last year, and she'll go into first grade this year.
Yeah.
And now, so in addition to having my own company for Seven, which I'm still working on, I'm also working with Neiman Marcus in their styling program. They started a digital styling program very similar to the e-commerce startup I mentioned earlier, but it's also super flexible. So it's great. I can still take her to school in the morning and take her to her after school activities and be home. And if there are days I have to be in the city, there's local babysitters who live in our neighborhood who can take care of her. So luckily it always seems to work out, and I haven't really struggled with childcare very much. I should knock on wood.
Yes. Do you think your daughter knows what your
What I do?
career is? Yes.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding me? Yes. Like, so my daughter loves clothes and dresses and dressing up, and she will very rarely wear something that's not a dress. And um I love dressing her, obviously, and her friends at school, they're always like, Brooke is so fancy, why is she so fancy? And one day she had a play date, and she and her friend were walking ahead of me, and I was behind them, and one of the friends like, Brooke, how come you're so fancy all the time? She's like, my mom's a stylist, isn't it obvious? And I'm like, what? So yeah, she knows what I do, and she loves it, and she flips back and forth from saying she wants to be a stylist like me or a designer like Joanna Gaines. So she's one or the other when she grows up. We'll see. And I actually took her to work for Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. I took her to Neiman Marcus, and oh my gosh, she had a blast. She got to style me, and she picked out a Dolce & Gabbana dress. And then she went down to accessories and picked out a Celine bag, one for her and one for me. So, yeah, she knows what she's doing.
She knows the brands.
She does. Like, excellent choices.
uh, any suggestions for people who are on the fence about changing careers?
I feel like, I'm no expert on this, but I feel like for me, if your heart's not in it anymore, then what's the point? And I need to acknowledge that I'm coming from a position where I could make choices and not change my lifestyle drastically. And I know it's not available to everyone. But when I no longer felt like I my heart wasn't in what I was doing at the one right before I changed jobs. I just wasn't. I wanted to be the one who was able to take care of my child, not go to work and figure out how to get people to buy more makeup. Eh, So when I stopped feeling passionate about it, then I knew I wasn't. I stopped performing. Like I wouldn't say stopped working as hard, but I wasn't. Just wasn't passionate about it, and so I knew it was time to change. And then things just kind of happened at the right moment. Luckily, I had taken all of those classes at FIT, or they wouldn't have hired me to do the freelancing work. Luckily, I did a good job at the freelancing work, so then they offered me this full time. Luckily, I had a husband who supported me doing that. Luckily, it was, right about the time when my daughter was ready to transition to a different child care situation anyway. So these things kind of lined up. But I would say that if you can keep doing your full-time job, if you're getting a sense that your heart's not in it anymore, but you can keep doing it while you explore another option and get a little bit of experience there, and then you can kind of make the pivot. I think that that's a safe way to do it.
Right.
And if you're making a choice that seems pretty drastic or dramatic, make sure you leave your old situation in a good friendly term, so that if you can, because I think that was, like, I kept saying to everybody, like, wow, good for you. I'm like, yeah, I can always go back. And I really felt that. And so I didn't feel like I was doing anything crazy or dramatic, because I'm like, whatever, I have to try it. I can always go back. And it was true. and then I just realized I didn't want to go back. But I think having those safety nets built in help a lot.
Right. And I know you downplay and say like you were okay with, a drastic change in salary,
Hmm.
but there were still sacrifices you made and you just learned to live without
Sure. Like
certain
when,
things.
so, and a lot of it was like trying to justify it, right? Trying to make
Right.
make myself feel better about this choice I was making that was going to impact my family. So literally, I joke about cutting cable, but I'm like, okay, let me look at the bills. We don't even watch TV that much. Why are we spending like 250 a month on cable? We cut cable. Like when I started making money with my new company, and when the like I'm making more money now, but I'm like, I don't need cable. Like we
Right.
don't need to go back there. So we realized all these things that we were spending money on that we didn't really need, and then you're in a better place because you kind of did that, like, I don't know the word, you did that like snipping, right? You cut
Right.
off all these. I started I would joke with Greg, like I would text him. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea milk costs $5 a gallon." I had no idea, like, because I would never pay attention. I
Right.
would just kind of shop and throw things in and pay the bill. And I'm like, "Wait, what?" And Greg's like, "Yeah, things." And I just get a little bit more cognizant. And even someone being a stylist and loving fashion and clothes, like I also realized, I don't need as much stuff, and nor do I want as much stuff. So, part of what I do is I help clients go through their closets and get rid of things that they no longer need or feel good in, or maybe doesn't fit them as well, but they're hanging on to it for some reason. When you eliminate all of that stuff and realize I don't need every new thing that comes out, you feel a little lighter and just not so bound by stuff.
Right.
So, and I think that was kind of a healthy thing that happened during this transition.
And it helps you even in your job because you understand like not everyone is going out there buying, the most expensive outfits and stuffing their
Nor do
closet
you
with
need
it.
to. I mean, I tell clients invest in what you can, right? I'm not a big proponent of fast fashion. I don't, I don't like to encourage clients to, go spend $200 at Old Navy. Like, don't take that $200 and buy a great fitting blazer that you'll wear for a few seasons, or make sure you have a great work bag and invest. If you can, if you can afford to spend $5,000 and buy a Chanel bag, fantastic, but you don't have to. If you can only afford a $300 bag, let's find the best bag you can for $300 that you can wear every day versus, spending that $300 on, a bunch of $20 items. So
Right.
it's like balancing that. And again, not I don't encourage people to buy the most expensive, but buy the best quality that you can afford and maximize quality over quantity, I think is important.
Right. You don't need this gigantic closet full of stuff that half of it you don't ever wear or it doesn't
Exactly.
last after, a few
Because
wears.
those big closets are overwhelming, right? Because if you have fewer things to choose from, but you know that everything that you own fits you really well, you feel good in it. You know it goes with at least 5 or 6 other items in your closet. Getting dressed in the morning is so much easier because you're not kind of trying to make your way through all this stuff. You know what you have and you know it works for you, so it's easier.
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show, Stacy. And I'll have links to your company if anyone wants to reach out to you.
Excellent.
And hopefully, we'll have you on again soon.
Thank you. This was fun.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye. So, thank you, Stacy, for coming on the show. We really enjoyed that. I know I've learned a lot from Stacy over the years about buying more pieces that can work with different outfits and not filling your closet with just a bunch of stuff just to say that you have it, but to have more manageable pieces and pieces that actually fit you. Definitely important after having a child. So, again, her company is First Seven, and they're also on Instagram, First Seven Consulting, if you would like to follow them. And if you would like a consultation, you can obviously contact them on their website, First Seven. And in the show notes, you'll kind of see that you can contact Stacy also. And hopefully we'll get to have her on again soon. So I hope you enjoyed the show. Again, if you want to subscribe to the podcast, just hit subscribe on whatever podcast app you are using. It's Apple Podcasts, not iTunes anymore. And but we're on basically everywhere, including YouTube. So go check us out at Mommy Escape Time. And you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at Mommy Escape Time also. Hopefully, you guys have a good week, and we hope to hear from you all soon. Bye.